He was unconscious, intubated, barely alive, yet when he opened his mouth, my brother's voice came out. After 20 years in the ICU, I thought nothing could surprise me anymore. I've seen lungs blackened by decades of smoking, hearts torn open by bullets, even bodies frozen stiff from the cold, and somehow brought back to life. You tell yourself after a while that medicine explains everything, that every strange twitch, every odd murmur, every flicker on a monitor has a logical reason. But there are nights when logic falters. Nights when something slips through the cracks of science and takes root inside you. It was one of those nights. The man arrived at 2:43 a.m., barely clinging to life. Paramedics had found him collapsed on a city bus. No ID, no family. Just a body pale as wax, lips blue, breath shallow and rattling. He'd seized twice en route, vomited blood, then slipped into unconsciousness. We did what we always do. Airway, breathing, circulation. His airway was compromised, blood pooling in the back of his throat, so I called for rapid sequence intubation. The tube slid past swollen cords. Suction cleared the mess, and soon the ventilator hissed its rhythm into him. His chest rose and fell, mechanical, steady. Pressures tanking, a nurse muttered, frowning at the monitor. Start Narepi. Draw blood, type and cross, chest x-ray now. I ordered, my voice automatic, crisp, practiced. He looked like any other critically ill patient, skin clammy, pupils sluggish, lines and tubes spidering out of him. Just another body in the blur of night, until his mouth moved. At first I thought it was a trick of the ventilator, air pushing past vocal cords. Sometimes patients make noises, groans, gasps, fragmented sounds. But this wasn't that. This was words. Clear, deliberate, barren. My name. My legs froze. The room seemed to tilt. No patient should know my name. Not like that. Not whispered with the same cadence, the same ache, as the voice I'd buried 10 years ago. My brother had called me that way. Always half laughing, half chiding. Barren. He was younger by 3 years, a shadow and a mirror, the only one who saw through me. He died at 21, an accident that still claws at my chest when I wake at night. I stepped closer to the bed, heart hammering against my ribs. What did you say? The man's eyes stayed shut, lids twitching with unconscious tremors. The ventilator hissed, the monitors beeped, but his lips moved again, slow, deliberate. Brother, brother. In my brother's exact voice, my throat tightened. The nurse looked at me, puzzled. Doctor, did he just? Delirium. I cut in. Too fast. Too sharp. Ignore it. But I couldn't ignore it. Because it wasn't just a voice. It was his voice. The voice of the boy I'd carried in my arms that night, blood soaking my shirt. The voice of the last person who had ever truly known me. And now it was coming out of the throat of a dying stranger. The nurse didn't look convinced. She tilted her head, watching the man's lips as if she expected them to move again. Doctor, she whispered, I swear he just called you. Delirium, I snapped, harsher than I meant. It happens. Air and sedation can cause strange vocalizations. But even as I said it, I knew I was lying. This wasn't garbled sound. This wasn't the mechanical hiss of the ventilator. Those words had shape, weight, memory. Barren. I forced my eyes back to the monitor, pressure stabilizing, with Narepi, oxygenation climbing. Numbers. Safe, solid numbers. Things I could measure. Things I could control. But then his lips parted again. I leaned closer, against my better judgment. Don't leave me. The words punched the air out of my lungs. They weren't random, weren't clinical. They were the last words my brother had said before the accident. It had been late, a rain-slick night. He'd begged me not to go, not to take the car, not to leave him standing there on the curb. I had gone anyway. Hours later, the police called. A crash. His body pulled from wreckage I could barely recognize. I'd heard those words in my nightmares for years. I'd never told anyone. Not my colleagues, not my family. No one knew. No one could know. Yet here they were, rasping from the throat of a man I'd never seen before. My knees went weak. I gripped the rail of the bed to steady myself. How? The question died in my throat. The nurse frowned, glancing between us. Doctor, he can't be conscious enough to speak. He isn't, I said, though my voice wavered. The man's eyelids fluttered. Just for a second, his pupils showed dark, sharp, almost knowing. Then they rolled back. His mouth opened once more, and this time the voice was broken, strained, but still unmistakably his. Why did you leave me? The room tilted. The ventilator hissed. The monitor beeped. The nurse called my name, but all I could hear was my brother's voice echoing through the years, through this man's failing lungs, dragging the past into the present. And for the first time in decades, I felt like that night had never ended. Like I was still standing in the rain, about to lose him all over again. I forced myself to back away from the bed, putting cold, sterile space between me and the man. The room was too small. The air tasted damp, metallic, like it did the night my brother died. The nurse's voice broke through my haze. Doctor, his vitals are holding, but this doesn't make sense. If he's unconscious, how is he? He isn't, I cut in. It's reflex. Don't pay attention. She didn't argue, but the look she gave me lingered. I busied myself with orders labs, a BG, CT, once he stabilized further. My hands moved, but my head was somewhere else, trapped between beeps and memories. When I dared glance back at him, his face looked the same as any other patient, pale, fragile, lost in machines. But then his eyes twitched beneath the lids again, rolling, darting, and suddenly they opened. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. They were brown, dark, familiar brown, the same shade as my brother's. The same way they used to lock on mine when we fought, when he begged me to listen, when he said, "Don't leave me." The patient's gaze sharpened, not confused, not vacant, focused on me. I whispered before I could stop myself. "Who are you?" His lips cracked into a faint smile around the tube. Then, impossibly, words spilled past plastic and sedation, raw and raspy. "Brother, remember the tree?" My skin went cold. The fig tree, our grandmother's garden, where we'd carved our initials into the bark as kids, swearing we'd never betray each other. A place no stranger could know. I stumbled back, crashing into the counter. The nurse jerked her head toward me. "Doctor?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mind was spiraling, because this wasn't just my brother's voice anymore. This was his memory. Something only he and I should ever know. The patient's lids drooped again, but before they closed fully, he mouthed one more word, clear and sharp. "Promise." My legs weakened. That had been his last word under the fig tree. He'd made me promise I'd never leave him behind. A promise I broke. And now, years later, lying on my ICU bed, a stranger was reminding me of the one oath I'd failed to keep. The word promise clung to me like a blade pressed against skin. I hadn't thought about that night under the fig tree in years, not the way it truly happened. I remembered his thin arms crossed over his chest, his defiant grin as he etched both our initials into the bark with a stolen pocket knife. I remembered the solemn way he made me swear, no matter what, we stick together. And I remembered breaking it the night he died. The patient's eyes slid shut, his chest rising in mechanical rhythm with the ventilator. But I could still hear my brother's voice, vibrating inside my skull. Not memory, not grief, present. The nurse adjusted a drip, her hands trembling. She tried to keep her tone professional, but I heard the edge. "Doctor, it's not possible. You look like you've seen a ghost." I forced my voice flat. "Focus on the labs. We treat the patient, not whatever this is." But even as I said it, I kept staring at his lips, waiting for them to move again. Terrified that they would, terrified that they wouldn't. The blood work came back. Anemia, hypoxia, metabolic acidosis, clear signs of a body failing. Objectively, he shouldn't have had the strength to move, let alone speak. And yet, when I leaned in to check his pupils, his eyes snapped open again. This time, there was no confusion, no haze, only intent. His voice pushed past the tube, warped but deliberate. "You left me on the road." My throat closed, my vision blurred. Because he was right. The crash had been violent, glass and metal twisted under rain. My brother pinned, bleeding, eyes wide with panic. I had crawled out through shattered doors, screaming for help. And for a few seconds, I didn't go back. I froze. I had told myself 1,000 times that I couldn't, that I was injured, that the fire, the smoke, the chaos had kept me away. But the truth was simpler. I had hesitated. And in that hesitation, he died. The patient's gaze cut into me like a knife, brown eyes burning with accusation. "Why did you run?" The nurse gasped softly. "Doctor, what's he talking about?" I backed away, shaking my head. He doesn't know. He can't know. But deep down I knew. This wasn't delirium. This was my brother speaking through a dying man, dragging into light the memory I had buried deeper than any grave. And the worst part? I could feel that it wasn't finished yet, because the dead rarely come back just to talk. They come back for answers, or revenge. The IQ walls seemed to close in, each beep of the monitor pulling me deeper into a memory I'd spent a decade avoiding. Rain slamming on glass, screeching tires. The metallic taste of blood in my mouth. My brother's hand clawing at mine as he whispered, "Don't leave me." I shook my head violently, trying to ground myself in the present. Sterile lights, nurses, machines. This was science, not haunting. But the patient's eyes didn't let me look away. "You ran," he rasped, voice mangled by the tube, but still carrying the cadence of my brother. "You left me there." My chest constricted. "No," I whispered, the word burning my throat. "I came back." But too late. His lips cracked into a smile that was all wrong, half triumph, half pain. "You froze. Just long enough." The nurse touched my arm, whispering like she was afraid the patient might hear. "Doctor, he knows things. Personal things." "Are you sure you don't know him?" I swallowed hard, my mouth dry. "I don't," I lied. But my heart hammered with another truth. He wasn't just repeating my brother's words. He was reliving my brother's death. The ventilator hissed, forcing air into him. The sound twisted into a rhythm, not mechanical anymore, but wet and ragged, like shallow breaths in the rain. My skin prickled. The machines were echoing that night. I staggered back, but his eyes followed me, sharp and unblinking. "Do you remember his face?" He whispered. Images slammed into me. Blood-matting dark hair. Lips moving soundlessly as sirens wailed in the distance. I pressed my palms to my temples, muttering, "Stop, stop." The patient's hand twitched against the sheet, fingers curling as if reaching. "He remembers you running. He remembers the promise." My knees nearly buckled. Promise. The tree. The initials carved into bark. The oath I'd broken the moment I left him gasping for air. The nurse stepped between us, her voice trembling. "Doctor, he's unstable. Maybe we should sedate." "No." The word burst from me too sharp, too desperate. Because I needed to hear what he would say next. And he didn't make me wait. His eyes widened, and with my brother's exact inflection, he whispered, "I saw what came after." The monitor spiked. The lights flickered. And for the first time since he arrived, I wasn't afraid of what he knew about the past. I was afraid of what he might reveal about the present. The words rang in my ears like a death knell. I saw what came after. I'd spent 10 years replaying the accident in my head, trying to reassemble the fragments, the rain, the glass, the screaming metal, but I had never let myself imagine after. After his chest stilled, after his hand slipped from mine, after the paramedics pulled me away, the patient's lips parted again. The ventilator hissed in rhythm with his voice. It wasn't dark, Baron. Not at first. There was light, and then the road opened. The nurse frowned. "Doctor, he's describing something." "Delirium," I muttered again, though my voice cracked on the word. But my brother had told me something once, something only I had heard. As a child, he'd confessed he was afraid of roads at night, that sometimes he dreamed of them stretching on forever, swallowing him whole. It wasn't something I'd ever repeated. The patient's eyes opened, brown and sharp. "You left me." But I didn't stop walking. A chill rippled through me. "Walking where?" His lips curved faintly. "The road doesn't end, brother. It waits. Every step I heard your name in the rain." The nurse's hand flew to her mouth. "This is impossible. How could he know?" I ignored her, leaning closer. "What did you see?" The patient's chest rose with a long mechanical inhale. When the air pushed back out, his voice came with it, low and steady. "Things waiting. Tall. Silent. They followed me. They watched me stumble down that road. And they whispered your name too." The monitor beeped in perfect rhythm with his words, each spike like a heartbeat that wasn't his. "You can't outrun it," he rasped, his gaze locking on mine. "I couldn't, and neither will you." The nurse backed away, pressing herself against the wall. "Doctor, I don't like this. He's not supposed to be able to." I cut her off. "Sedate him if he destabilizes, but not before." She looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had, but I couldn't silence him. Not now. The patient coughed, dirt-brown sputum streaking the tube. His eyes fluttered shut, then snapped open again, wider than before. "I saw you there, brother. At the end of the road." My blood went cold. "What? You were waiting?" His voice thinned, cracked. "And you looked just like me." The monitor flatlined for a single beat before returning to normal. The lights flickered once, twice. And I realized with a sinking dread that he wasn't just here to remind me of the past. He was here to show me my own ending. The flatline tone still echoed in my ears, even though the monitor had already recovered, showing steady vitals again. A cruel trick of sound one note meant death, but here it was just a warning. The patient's eyes burned into me, pupils too wide, swallowing the brown until there was almost nothing human left. His voice, rough through the tube, came in short bursts between the ventilator's hiss. "You're there. At the end, I walked, and you were waiting." My throat closed. "That's not possible." The nurse whispered from the corner, her voice shaking. "Doctor, please, this isn't normal. We should sedate him. Call psych." "No," my shout startled her. My own voice sounded foreign to me, desperate. I turned back to the patient. "What do you mean I was waiting?" His cracked lips twitched into something like a smile. "Because you promised, under the fig tree, together forever." My knees weakened. That memory again. The bark scarred with our initials. The pocket knife in his hand. The oath we made as children. I had promised never to leave him, and then I did. "I didn't keep walking alone," he rasped. "You were there. Already there. You'll always be there." The lights above us flickered, buzzing. Shadows stretched unnaturally long along the walls. The nurse whimpered, clutching her rosary. "Doctor, something's in this room. I can feel it." I wanted to deny it, to tell her she was imagining things, but the truth was, I felt it too. The air pressed heavier with each word he spoke, like the ICU wasn't just a room anymore, but a threshold. I leaned closer, against my better judgment. My voice cracked. "What did you see at the end of the road?" His pupils locked onto mine, and for the first time, his words weren't just his. They carried the weight of another voice. My brother's. "You, standing in the rain, calling my name." The monitor beeped once, loud and sharp, then another. A rhythm that wasn't his vitals. A rhythm I recognized from that night. The rhythm of me pounding on his chest, screaming for him to breathe, the night the rain washed his last breath away. Tears blurred my vision. "No, that's not real. That's not me." But he only whispered, soft and sure, "It is. Because the road doesn't end, brother. It just waits for both of us." And with those words, the lights went out. The ventilator hissed once more. And then the room filled with the sound of footsteps, wet, dragging, many of them approaching from somewhere just beyond the walls. The sound slithered into the ICU like water spilling through cracks. Slap, drag, slap, drag. Footsteps, heavy and wet, circling the unit, though no door had opened. The nurse whimpered, clutching the counter. "Doctor, there's no one out there, right?" "Right?" I couldn't answer. My mouth had gone dry. The monitors glowed green in the dark, casting sickly light across the patient's face. His eyes rolled back and snapped forward, locking on me again. "They've been walking a long time," he whispered, the words rasping past the tube like broken glass. "They followed me down the road, and now they've followed me here." The footsteps grew louder, closer, overlapping as if dozens of unseen feet shuffled just beyond the walls. My chest tightened. For a moment I swore. I felt water seeping across the floor, damp against my shoes, though the tiles gleamed dry. The nurse clutched my arm. "Doctor, I can hear them." "Don't listen," I said, though my own voice trembled. The patient's lips curled, faint amusement in his ruined smile. "You always ran from them. But not this time. This time, they've found you." The lights flickered back on for a heartbeat, revealing an empty hallway beyond the glass. Then darkness swallowed it again. The monitor spiked his heart rate, rising though his body stayed eerily still. The beeping merged with the footsteps, creating a rhythm that hammered inside my skull. I leaned closer despite the dread clawing at my chest. "What do they want?" His brown eyes gleamed with something older, something that wasn't him. "They want the promise kept. They want you to walk with us." "Us?" I whispered. "Me," he rasped. "And all the others you left behind." The nurse sobbed quietly. "Doctor, please make it stop." The footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was worse. Then, from just behind my ear, a voice I knew better than my own whispered one word. "My brother." I spun, heart hammering, but there was nothing there, just sterile walls, trembling shadows, and the empty hush of machines. When I turned back, the patient was smiling wide, dirt trickling from the corners of his mouth. And with my brother's exact tone, he whispered, "Welcome back to the road." The words "welcome back to the road" crawled under my skin. For a second, I was sure I smelled exhaust, wet asphalt, and the iron tang of blood. Then the floor beneath my shoes shifted. Not tile, gravel. I staggered back, eyes darting. The sterile walls of the ICU melted into black night, the machines flickering like headlights dying in the rain. The nurse screamed, clutching at her chest. "Doctor, where are we? What's happening?" I knew. God help me, I knew. We were back there, On the road, the one I'd driven 100 times in dreams, but only once in reality, the night my brother died. Rain lashed my face, though the ceiling above us should have been solid. The air stank of gasoline. My ears filled with the echo of metal folding, the ringing aftermath of the crash. And the patient, he was no longer lying on the bed. He was standing in the middle of the road, tubes and lines dangling from his arms, eyes burning brown in the dark. "You remember this place," he said in my brother's voice, words sharp through the storm. "You tried to forget, but the road never forgets." The nurse clutched my arm, sobbing. "Doctor, I don't understand. Where are we? This isn't real. It can't be real." I wanted to tell her she was right, that it was delirium, hallucination, hypoxia, but the gravel bit into my knees, wet and sharp. This was real enough. Lightning split the sky, illuminating a figure slumped on the pavement ahead. My chest collapsed in on itself. It was him, my brother. The way he looked, that night hair matted with blood, chest barely rising, eyes wide and begging. "Don't leave me," he whispered, the same plea as before. I staggered toward him, heart tearing itself apart. "I won't. Not this time." But the patient blocked me, his grin wide, his voice now layered his and my brother's, fused together. "Too late, you already did." The road stretched on behind him, endless, lined with figures barely visible in the rain. Tall, faceless, swaying like trees in the wind. Each step they took echoed in my skull. "They've been waiting," the patient hissed, "for you to walk with us." The nurse sobbed, trembling. "Doctor, please, get us out of here." But the road stretched endless, the hospital gone. And my brother's broken body lay in front of me again, lips moving, whispering words I had tried to bury for 10 long years. "You promised, brother. You promised you wouldn't leave me." My legs locked, torn between him on the ground and the thing wearing his voice. And for the first time, I realized this was never about saving him. It was about whether I would join him. Rain hammered down, soaking through my scrubs, stinging my eyes. I couldn't feel the ICU anymore, just the endless stretch of road, slick and glistening like black glass under the lightning. The nurse clung to me, trembling, eyes darting between the broken body on the asphalt and the patient standing tall, grinning through the storm. "Doctor, please, we can't stay here." My brother's body shifted, his chest rising once, barely. His lips moved, the sound drowned in rain until I bent down and caught it. "Brother, don't leave me." The same words. The same plea. 10 years collapsed into a single breath. The patient laughed, the sound wet, distorted. "You left him once. Now you can decide again." Lightning split the sky, illuminating the faceless figures lining the road. Dozens, maybe hundreds, watching silently, their shadows stretching into the dark. Each step they took echoed in my chest, my pulse syncing with the rhythm. Slap, drag, slap, drag. "You can join him," the patient rasped, his brown eyes burning. "Lie down beside him. Keep the promise. End the road together." The nurse tugged at me, her voice breaking. "Or you can walk away. With me. Back to the hospital. Back to life." I froze. My brother's pale hand lifted weakly from the ground, reaching for mine. His eyes, those same dark brown eyes, pleaded through the storm. "Promise," he whispered. The patient grinned wider, dirt spilling from his mouth. "Say it again, Khan. Bury yourself this time. Keep what you broke." The nurse shook me hard, tears streaking down her face. "No, you don't belong here. You can't give in to this." The road roared louder, the storm circling closer. My brother's hand reached, the nurse's grip pulled, and I realized with crushing clarity, this wasn't just a memory. This was judgment. The road demanded an answer. Stay with him or walk away? Lightning flared. The figures leaned forward. The patient's voice thundered, "Shoes." The rain blurred everything, my brother's hand reaching from the asphalt, the nurse's grip on my arm, the faceless figures swaying at the edge of the road. My chest heaved like the storm was inside me, pounding against my ribs. "Con," my brother rasped, his lips pale, his eyes drowning in pain. "Promise." The word tore through me. 10 years ago, I had let it die on his lips. I had frozen, paralyzed, and when I finally moved, it was too late. Now the road was giving me a second chance or a punishment. The patient's grin widened even further, his voice echoing from all directions simultaneously. "Hide it, brother, or spoil it again, but choose." The nurse pulled hard at my sleeve, desperation cracking her voice. "Doctor, listen to me. You can't stay here. This thing is feeding on your guilt. If you go to him, you'll never come back." But my brother's trembling hand was still there, palm open, waiting. The promise we made under the fig tree echoed in my mind. Together, forever. Lightning flashed. The faceless figures leaned closer, their shadows stretching until they nearly touched me. The road vibrated with the scrape of unseen footsteps, urging me to kneel, to join him, to end the endless walk. I dropped to my knees, gravel biting my skin. My brother's hand slipped into mine, cold, wet, but solid. His eyes widened, shining with something like relief. "Brother." Tears blurred my vision. "I'm here. I won't leave you again." The patient's laughter thundered above the storm, triumphant. At last, the promise kept. The nurse screamed behind me, "No, don't do this." But her voice was already fading, swallowed by the roar of the storm, the pounding footsteps, the endless stretch of road. I looked into my brother's eyes one last time. They weren't full of pain anymore. They were calm, waiting. And as the faceless figures closed in, I realized the truth. I hadn't saved him. I had joined him. The road had claimed us both. The storm swallowed me whole. Gravel scraped my knees. My brother's hand gripped mine, and the faceless crowd pressed in until there was nothing but footsteps and rain. Then silence. When I opened my eyes, I was no longer on the road. I was back in the ICU. Fluorescent lights flickered weakly. Machines hummed. Monitors blinked green. Everything looked normal, except for one thing. The bed was empty. No patient, no tubes, no body. Just tangled sheets and the faint smear of dirt across the pillow. The nurse stood frozen against the wall, her eyes wide, her lips trembling. She was staring at me, no, through me. "Doctor," her voice cracked, tiny and broken. "Where are you?" I looked down at my hands, pale, transparent. My reflection in the monitor's glass shimmered, faint, already fading. The footsteps echoed one last time, faint but steady, retreating down a road only I could hear. The nurse stumbled forward, shaking her head. "You were right there beside me, and then," her breath hitched into sobs, "and then you were gone." On the floor, near the bed frame, something glinted. She bent and picked it up with trembling fingers. A fragment of glass. Green. Her scream tore through the ICU, but by then I was already gone, drawn back to the road, walking beside my brother, the promise kept at last. The monitors beeped on, steady as ever, as if mocking the absence of the doctor who once trusted science to explain everything. But science had no answer for the empty bed, or for the green glass shard that pulsed faintly with rainwater, though no storm had touched the hospital that night. Knock, knock, knock. The sound came from nowhere, from everywhere, from under the floor.